Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today's podcast is an interview with Olaf Birkenmeier, Head of External Manufacturing for Polpharma Biologics. Olaf's career has taken him from technical roles at companies such as Sandoz and Novartis to leading Polpharma Biologics' strategic CDMO relationships. We discuss the different considerations needed to be successful in managing manufacturing for small molecule generics compared to innovative biologics products. Olaf, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Luke, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. You've had a really interesting journey, I think, from those technical roles at Sandoz through to heading up external manufacturing at where you are now, Polpharma Biologics. So it'd be great to start off, I think, by just talking a bit about your experience and some of those milestones along the way, please.
Yeah, sure. I started out in MS&T roles, so tech transfer manager, PPQ, or validation manager and so on, and then basically transitioned into a role where I was tech transfer manager or technical manager for the external manufacturing organization. And there, you do a lot of troubleshooting, tech transfer from one CMO to another, internal sites to external and so on. And basically the setup is that you have supplier relationship teams. So you have a small team which is dealing with one or more accounts, which is a CMO, and you basically mirror the site which you're working with. So you have someone from supply chain, you have some technical guy, you obviously have quality, and then someone who is the supplier relationship manager who deals then with the relationship, right? And if you are, let's say, in a small team and you're working nicely together, or in several teams, then you understand more and more the whole business side and whole, let's say, the holistic part of let's say, managing external supply for obvious reasons. And for me, basically, that was a logical step to broaden a little bit what I'm doing and to try to understand more the other parts. And this is basically the reason why I decided to go more into the supplier relationship role or heading then external manufacturing. And the alternative is also very interesting to be, let's say, a global expert for some technical aspect of something. I mean, if you just follow the MS&T pathway. But I was always attracted by this international relation, the complexity of managing that, and the different aspects what you deal, so that you don't just focus on technical aspects, but really the holistic part of the business, from quality aspects to supply aspects to technical aspects to life cycle management activities. So yeah, this is why I transitioned.
Do you find that having that technical foundation gives you a wider skill set to deal with those CMOs and a wide range of different supply partners than perhaps if you came at it from the other way and then had learned the science afterwards?
Yeah. I mean, I might obviously be biased, but I think it's definitely good to have a technical background or to understand really the molecule, because in the end, I mean, if you having a supply chain background and you're basically producing clothes somewhere, probably it doesn't really matter whether it's, t-shirts or pants or whatever, right? But if you're dealing with highly complex molecules or substances, it really matters, or details really matter, and you would like to keep an eye on the details to really understand the business and to make the best decisions or to make the best proposals on how to deal with complex setups. And I think here technical background is really helpful, or put it this way, some technical understanding or interest that, let's say, small molecule might be a different dynamic, let's call it this way, than a biosimilar or a novel biologic, right? And so I think it's quite helpful to if you're coming not from a technical scientific background, to understand this a little bit more, rather than saying, hey, we have items moving from A to B. Yeah.
In your career, you've worked across outsourcing of small molecule generics and now where you're at currently in biologics manufacturing. It'd be interesting, I think, to hear your perspective on some of the different ways of approaching those different modalities. What are the considerations which you need to have for different types of drug product?
I mean, one thing is obviously the value of the API, but what you're processing. Yeah, and this is different if you're having, let's say, on one end, novel biologics, which obviously is very high and very expensive for the API, as compared to, let's say, all generics, right, which are basically at the end of the life cycle. And this drives a lot of decisions and moves a little bit your risk appetite or the needle between, put it this way, safety and risk and the trade-off. So, for example, if you have, let's say, generics which are really just sold on price, and there are a lot of competitors out there, you know that you need to meet a certain price, else you will not sell anything. And this is, let's say, obviously the driving criteria. So you're looking for CMOs which are good enough. I mean, yeah, but you don't really expect much excellence or willing to pay for that because, I mean, there's so much competition out there, and the competition basically is on price. In comparison, if you have, let's say, biologics, biosimilars, then you say, well, you might not so easily replace a batch, and the value is higher. So you're looking to find a good combination of CMOs which are not too expensive, but who are very experienced in handling these substances. For example, that they have a very good quality system, that they have modern lines, that they have obviously all the approvals you need or will have them very soon in order to allow the launch, and also some minor details like line losses, for example. I mean, you have a certain dead volume, you have sampling issues and whatever. And if you have one company who's very experienced in dealing with expensive API, you know they would probably look into that one. And if you have a company who's basically dealing with cheap generics, they might not care as much about squeezing the last milliliter out of the drug product solution, because that doesn't matter that much. And this is what you would look for. So I would say, in a nutshell, the more expensive your APIs, the higher are the demands on the CMO to have, let's say, good equipment, good experience, because, let's say, any failure will hurt you a lot and much more than maybe a small molecule. And another aspect is, if you look at the portfolio as a general thing, so I mean, if you're a small biotech, you might have one to, let's say, a handful of products in the pipeline, right? So, and if one of them fails or has a delay, this will be significant or even catastrophic. If you are a classical generic business, you have a portfolio of a lot of molecules, and each one is making, let's say, a tiny part of the portfolio. So if you have issue with one, this will not be as significant as compared to having, let's say, a biotech with, I mean, sometimes even only one molecule, right? And this is also, let's say, which drives the cost versus quality aspect, what you would like to take into consideration.
So to give some context then, at Polpharma Biologics, what does the overall product portfolio look like? How many CDMOs you work with? Get a sense of the business.
Yeah, biosimilars is obviously a rather expensive business in terms of the program cost to develop that. So, and Polpharma is obviously a good company, but we are not huge. So you have a handful of molecules. I mean, depends how you count in different stages and so on. And yeah, you need to ensure that. And there are two aspects to consider. One thing, obviously, is you need to drive the molecule through the pipeline. And if you decided to outsource some activities, their, let's say, timelines are a critical aspect in the selection, that you have, let's say, a flexible CMO who supports you with that and has some experience, right? And yeah, so you're dealing with a handful of molecules as compared to, let's say, a classical generic one. And obviously this means each molecule is worth, let's say, a significant part of the overall business. So everything needs to work out nicely in order to move ahead. Yeah.
Talking then about the high value of those APIs, you were talking about the risk of batch failure. It'd be great if you could give us a bit more information about different approaches around risk management for those high value biologics. What are those strategies and tactics which are required for biologics compared to, say, the generic small molecules?
I mean, one thing obviously is the equipment and experience of the CMO you're working with, right? So classical example is with biologics or biosimilars, you would always go for an isolator if possible, even if, let's say, this is more expensive, because you say, well, this will reduce the risk of any aseptic issues, call it that way. And you are willing to pay more because, let's say, everyone wants to have the isolator line, right? Especially everyone wants to have the new isolator line. So this is where you say, hey, this is something where we really focus on and look for CMOs who have obviously the experience with other biologics. Yeah. And the small molecules, you might say, well, this might not be the newest line, the best line. Maybe the line losses are a little bit higher, but let's say overall the price of the batch is significantly less. And let's say there might be a little bit more risk, but this is acceptable. So then you would say, well, maybe let's go for not the nicest and newest line, but one which gives you a good mix of quality and price. So this is one thing, and it's also interesting, maybe to elaborate on a little bit, that obviously there are some CMOs who are, let's say, or were in the business of the classical aseptic molecules, and let's say everyone is moving more into this biologic field, and but this requires some expertise in terms of you have to implement new methods. So this is all the one selection criteria that you would like to go to a site which has the biologic methods available, which might be completely different than classical generics, right? And understands the issue, or not the issues, the potential problems. I mean, might be simple things like having enough cold storage at -60, which is usually not required for small molecules, right? And all these aspects, you would look, okay, do they have the storage capacity? Do they have the experience? Do they have the methods? Did they have a similar product before? Do they have the right approvals? Also in terms of the biologics part as compared to classical, FDA, CBR versus CBR, right? So this is where you would look into this, saying, hey, did they do this before, and are they capable of doing that? Yeah.
How does that all impact the CMO, CDMO selection process? I guess internally, with your relationship with procurement and other functions, I imagine that in a generics-led business, procurement would take leading role and pushing on price. But if you're looking for something very, very specific and specialist, as an external manufacturing leader, do you still go through a similar evaluation process of RFP, RFQs, etc.?
Yeah.
How does that whole process change?
I think there are two aspects. One thing, and this is, let's say, delicate balance. So one thing is, you would like to go to some CMO who is very fast and can do the program batches in order for you to meet, let's say, the timeline to be then on the market, or let's say be right after the patent expired. So you would say, well, I wouldn't say throw money at it, but you say, well, this is important and this needs to be there. On the other hand, you have to keep in mind that biosimilars will also have a price erosion, and probably this will get more, I wouldn't say more brutal, but this will be, let's say, getting more in the area of generics. So on the other hand, you have to keep in mind, okay, well, we have to produce that, let's say, at a decent price over the life cycle, and you have to balance this a little bit, saying, hey, we should move fast, but we should have some solution which works, so let's say, in the mid or long term. And you can always do upscaling, but it's expensive, right? So, and it's I mean, obviously you align with the program team, saying what are the requirements, what are the most critical things, what is the forecast that you can pick a, let's say, decent line for that, which is not too big and not too small, right? And you need to involve quite a few people, and obviously you discuss about price and the thing, but obviously the selection, or let's say the number of suitable CMOs is limited, yeah, and because of higher, let's say, technology demands and experience, and with generics, there are more who can do this. I mean, classical generics, and it's a classical thing. If you have more supply or more vendors, you can say, well, okay, let's push a little bit more on price, all other things being equal. And you also need to push a little bit more on price because the competition is out there, especially if the patent expired some time ago, and you have a lot of competition out there. Mm-hmm. So you really have to focus really on price. While with biosimilar, it's it's a little bit more complicated. I mean, to be fair if there are new generics, they always need to have the balance on speed and the time on market and price. But all generics where there are already competitors on the market, this is really give us something which is cheap and works. And we had once the case where basically someone said, okay, well, if there's any issue with the product, it's dead. It doesn't make sense to transfer to another site because it's and it doesn't really make sense to mitigate too much because the margin were so small. I mean, that is and this is really what you have to keep in mind. Know your molecule and know the requirements which make best sense for it.
What role does site visits have? If you're going on a site visit yourself, are there particular things which you're always looking for?
I think they're crucial. I mean, one thing is you want to obviously check the technical thing, but also one thing to really keep in mind is you would like to get a feeling of the site, how the people are acting, how the site looks like, how they are taking care of things, right? And I mean, you look at the line, you ask the technical question, hey, how fast can the line produce? What is the dead volume? Blah blah blah, and then obviously quality, if they're coming along and not going for separate audit. Also ask some questions about the qualities, but often it's I would say gut feeling or the impression. Do they take care of things? Yeah, and this is sometimes minor things which you see. I mean, you might visit a site which has old equipment, for example, but everything is in very nice condition. You see, okay, well, they don't have the newest line, they don't have, let's say, the newest HPLC or whatever, but everything is tidy, spotless. All the lab box and everything is nice. And when you say, well, okay, they probably know what they're doing, and then you might have sites which look a little bit old, put it this way, and we say, well, maybe they don't keep up that much, or you might have new sites which look new, but you say, well, okay, maybe there are a few things are still missing, and you need to really understand what they're doing. And the things you can look at this, you can have a nice presentation saying, hey, they have a newest line from whatever company you prefer, and this is great. But if you are at the site and then you see, well, there are no experienced people, or everyone looks like freshly hired, then you might say, well, they might have nice equipment, but do they have the right experience to actually utilize that? Or you might have go to some old line and they have very experienced people, and you say, well, maybe they don't have the newest equipment, but probably the operators know their line since, I don't know, 5, 10, whatever years. So they know everything and probably know what to do. And this is something which is hard to determine by a call or by, so it's definitely worth to go there and get the impression and go there with, let's say, a few people. So let's say from a technical side, someone with quality, maybe someone from the program, to have more than one set of eye looking into things.
Taking an international perspective, there's often debate about manufacturing in Asia versus Central Europe, obviously where Polpharma is itself. What factors do you recommend people take into consideration when they're looking at regionally where they should be situating their manufacturing bases?
Yeah, I mean, and this all goes into, you need to know your molecule business case and all of that. So generally speaking, if you go, let's say, to Asia, China, India, you will get cheaper offers as compared to Europe or Switzerland or US. I mean, but what you also need to keep in mind is your whole supply chain. So, for example, if you have drug substance in one place and DP in another place and packaging in another place, right? So if everything is within the European Union, you might move very fast between, and you don't need to take that much inventory. And let's say the time between the S batch to DP batch, let's say, might be shorter. If you import something from Asia, you need European import testing, or then European QP release. This is additional work, and let's say this additional risk that something might go wrong during transport or this stuff. And this is something what you should, let's say, realistically figure in terms if you're comparing that.
Have you looked at the UK recently or since Brexit? Did you evaluate the pros and cons of manufacturing in Britain?
Yeah, and this is exactly the thing, that there are some sites in UK, and I mean they are not worse than before, obviously, but you say, hey, there is now some complication in moving the goods back and forth, and obviously the companies are experienced, and you are not the only customer, but it might be that your truck is standing, I don't know, one day longer or needs some more paperwork to get it through. So I think I mean, given, I don't know, a chance between a site in France and a site in UK, all things being equal, I would go to France, or let's say not UK due to the reason. So the sites in UK need to be a little bit better to justify the additional effort, or a little bit cheaper, whatever you would like to call it. So I think there is a disadvantage of not being in the EU at the moment. I mean, obviously, UK is easier in terms of communication time zones than whatever, rather than dealing with I don't know, China, for example. But yeah, it's definitely something what you should look into or plan how this might impact your supply chain and moving things around.
Yeah. What about the general geopolitical situation at the moment with China? I mean, particularly with the US, with the new administration that's come in. I mean, how is it impacting your thought process? Uncertain situation in the world's biggest drug market.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think, the question everyone is asking at the moment. It's definitely something what you need to look into. I mean, high level, if you go to China, there are, let's say, very good sites and which are very cost competitive, right? And the question is, if you do, for example, drug substance in China and you do DP, or let's say finished pack in Europe or somewhere else, would this be an issue if you then export this to US and so on? But I mean, this is something which I wouldn't say priced in, but what you would think about.
Is there any clarity on that question at the moment? If you did do that, would that still be acceptable in the US if you manufactured in that way?
I mean, the thing is, formally, yes. So, I mean, there's this big thing with Biosecure Act and whether some companies with potential ties to the PLA or Communist Party might or might not be on the list. So, and the thing is a little bit, it's, if you look at the Biosecure Act, I mean, it's only affecting, let's say, a handful of companies, but I mean, strictly speaking, or they are named, but you don't know whether it's, let's say, the interpretation is a little bit broader. Yeah. And this is, and no one can tell you how this will play out in the future.
Yeah.
And or you can say, well, strictly speaking, this only applies to things which the government pays. So let's say for Medicare and Medicaid. So if you're selling something via different channels, then you might not really be affected. But on the other hand, I mean, you don't want to say, well, we are not able to supply this. And so it's, I think everyone is looking into that. So there's definitely some risk and some opportunity, because on the other side, I mean, people are thinking, or let's say companies are thinking, well, maybe China has some, producing in China has some risk. But I mean, there are some companies in China, obviously, and if the let's say the clients are a little bit hesitant, you can probably get a very good deal at the moment, saying, hey, I know that other customers might be hesitant. I know that maybe you don't have your capacity for the utilized. Maybe you can offer me a good deal to offset the risk, right? And this is also something which you might or might not want to consider. So I think there's no clear answer to go to China or don't go to China, or there is no risk or there is risk. It's to be seen. Yeah.
Very interesting times. At Polpharma Biologics, you've got an interesting year ahead, I think. So you're expanding your CMO network. You
Yeah.
talked about bringing in, 3 or 4 different CMOs, CDMOs potentially.
Yeah.
How are you planning that whole network expansion?
One thing obviously is, I mean, what we are outsourcing is the fill and finish operation. Yeah. And here you need to obviously look into the format, so whether you have syringes, vials, and whatever, and let's say the sizes. So classically, so the first thing is, okay, you look whether something fits already into one CMO you already work with. Yeah. Because all other things being equal, it's obviously better to have more products at one site rather than spreading them around within in terms of, let's say, oversight and these things. So the classical thing is you would have the request for quotations, send it out to several CMOs, especially the ones you're working with, and then see what they're offering. And so first thing is there is a preference to go to some which you already have, but this might, for let's say capacity reasons, or maybe they don't have the format what you would like to have, or maybe the forecast what you have for one molecule is not fitting the line which you already work with. So for example, if you have one molecule which sells, I don't know, 100,000 of syringes and one which needs a handful of vials, right? I mean, they might not be then the best fit. So you might need to go to another company. So so this is basically the reason. If you have different presentations and with different requirements, let's say your footprint will grow automatically. Because you cannot fit everything into one site or one line, even if you would like to. And also capacity, and probably I'm not the only one telling this, is an issue at the moment.
Because of GLP-1s, I suppose, in fill finish, is that one of the causes, would you say?
I mean, Annex 1 is obviously one thing, and let's say there's although, let's say, China is, let's say, this is also not helping, right? So people are looking into that, and let's say the Novo acquisition is also not helping in terms of. So obviously there are some competition, so you really need to look a little bit, okay, where to place things to balance it a little bit. Let's say the price versus free capacity versus experience and all of that. Interesting times as often.
How are you trying to manage that when I imagine if your demand forecasts may be quite at an early stage, perhaps, if they're not commercially available products? How do you try and balance securing the right amount of capacity versus not really knowing exactly what the demand is going to be? How do you try and balance that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a classical dilemma, right? I mean, you have, let's say, whenever you start a molecule program, business, or make some assumption regarding what the forecast will be. And this is where you work with. So classical, I mean, you have your long-term forecast and say in the request for quotation, you say, based on our information, we expect whatever forecast, right? And then this is driving the line decision, whether you go to a high-speed line or, let's say, a smaller line and so on. And it's an ongoing discussion, basically. I mean, typically you have this long-term forecast, and then you start into this rolling forecast 2 years ahead or whatever, and then you start into the orders. But it's an ongoing discussion, and you might be, for different reasons, be wrong and need to update the forecast. I mean, for example, if there's competition coming up earlier than you expected, and this might affect the numbers what you would order, or if you are faster than the competition, right, then you might need higher forecast. So it's an ongoing discussion, and it's difficult for both sides, because you would like to have the capacity, even though you might not need this. On the other hand, no CMO wants to have idle capacity. So it's always, okay, what commitments can you give, and how tough is the binding forecast versus the non-binding one? It's an ongoing discussion.
Complicated. When you're doing this forecasting, network building, how then are you thinking about building in changing external manufacturing priorities? So whether that's ESG requirements, supply chain security, how do you build that into your roadmap?
I mean, it's highly correlated with your forecast and let's say the overall business case. So in an ideal world, and if cost wouldn't matter, you would say, hey, always go for second source. Let's have qualify this side and this side, and then yeah. But I mean, obviously there are some constraints, so you need to think a little bit about your risk appetite, how likely this is that your forecast will change significantly, how much commitments can you make to lock in the forecast. I mean, in the end, you can. I mean, the CMOs don't want to have idle capacity for obvious reasons, right? And if you have some agreements with them that there are cancellation fees, or that whatever you forecast, you need to pay a certain amount regardless whether you order or not, then obviously you can get the capacity. But this cost, if you don't have this, and on the other hand, there might be opportunity cost if you say, well, let's go for a lower forecast than you might anticipate, and then you could sell more, but you cannot do this because you don't get the capacity. So you have to look into the molecule, how important this is, how important, let's say, the upside or not meeting the forecast will be, and try to, and this is a tough discussion, get as much non-binding forecast commitments as you can, but this is not the great time to I mean, there's a lot of people asking for capacity, so it's difficult, but yeah, you should think about second sourcing, especially when you are in Asia, or and yeah, and also thinking about other issues. For example, you can think about safety stocks if you don't have the capacity, so that you can stockpile a little bit. And this also depends on your molecule and on the shelf life, right? So there is no clear answer to go do that and you're gold. You just really talk to a lot of people and understand the requirements and the risk appetite and how much money you would like to invest to have the capacity when you need this, and secure yourself against some supply chain disruption. I mean, it's classical thing, just in time versus inventory, which is costly, but then you can produce. So, and yeah.
Finally, Olaf, I wonder what advice you could give to others, maybe others listening who are thinking about going on a similar career path to you. So maybe from a technical role and moving into this wider external manufacturing, more strategic type of role. What do you wish that someone had told you at the time? And are there any recommendations you could give around reading or training or anything like that for someone to sort of, step into this type of role?
It's probably a trivial advice, but listen to your colleagues who have, let's say, different roles, and try to really understand them, and try to get to anticipate why they are, let's say, focused on these things. I mean, if you're a technical role, you are interested in the product and that the PPQ runs nice and so on. But if you're looking into supply chain, I mean, it's like you have to really try to understand the mindset which is behind saying, hey, we would like to move things as quickly as possible through the different stages. We like to keep inventory as low as possible, but we need to ensure that that we always have enough in order to have to avoid stockouts. And this is it's difficult to learn from books also. It's more like, okay, well, if you are working with people together in a close team, then you understand these things more. So really step out of your silo and then talk to people over coffee about, hey, what is driving the decision, or why are you pushing for that? And this really helps. Same with quality, that you really try to understand holistically what is going on. And what I would, let's say, advise people or who are working at the site, because for me this was a major, I would say, epiphany, was if you're working at the typical site role, you say, okay, well, we are producing, this is great, and we are selling at good prices. But as soon as you go into external manufacturing, external supply, the realization is the patient or the customer doesn't care where the stuff is coming from. They care about price and quality, and that the stuff is there on time. And this is a, let's say, different mindset. And also interesting for people who are working at the site, saying, hey, you might do a very good job and you might have attractive price, but there might be other sites which are even more attractive. And so you need to be on your toes to let's say, meet the standards. And this is something what you really should think. There will always be some competition out there who might be doing things faster and leaner and nicer than you, let's put it this way. And you should, let's say, keep this in mind. Yeah, and this especially goes for China and India. I mean, there are tremendously good companies out there which you don't have on the radar, or not yet. And let's say normal people might be surprised, hey, why do we have now all these nice Chinese cars? But I think the same will happen, let's say, in biosimilars, or let's say in pharmaceuticals, that there is a lot of activities going on, and companies are, let's say, growing, building expertise, and so on. And there will be the point when they are really starting to export more. And this is really where you should not be complacent and really, think, okay, how can we get better? Because let's say we are, I mean, whatever company you're working is, there are always competition out there, and there are very good and smart people in other companies and other countries. So try to learn, try to work nicely together, and optimize your whole supply chain and processes. That's what I would say. And look for this, that you understand the issues, not just say, hey, we are great. Might be, but other one might be getting better and better, right?
I think that's a really interesting point. And it's not just in pharma, of course, but when you look across other industries, I mean, you mentioned automotive, but it's also happened just a couple of weeks ago in the AI space with DeepSeek.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think that, again, not necessarily just in pharma, but do you think there's a complacency sometimes within Western countries about this?
I do, definitely. I mean, the thing is, it's always like, if you're on a system, organization, community, and everything is going smoothly, you might not realize that what is behind the horizon, right? Because you don't really see this. Yeah, and if you are, and this is maybe the thing in external manufacturing, you see this. So if you're asking for quotes and you get a quote from company here and company there, and then you look at the differences and you can say, well, maybe they are not as good yet, but they are really, I mean, value for money might be okay. And let's say if you just say, well, they might get better, then you can say, well, at this prices, there might be the preference to go there much faster than you might imagine. And this is, I think, what many people don't have on their radar. That's saying you don't need to be good, you need to be better than others to drive your business. And many people are saying, well, we are good, this is good, and we are getting better. It's nice, but it's like the Red Queen. I mean, it's like you need to run faster than others to keep up, or to stay in the business for long, right? And I think many people are or don't really understand this because they don't have the experience. And I mean, let's say if you ask a normal patient, they will not get prices for different medication or care about the supply chain or whatever. But if you are in the business and you see, let's say, price differences, or you are looking at sites which are like new and have tremendous capacity and whatever, and you think there might be something going on. Yeah, and then you are a little bit more aware of these topics.
In terms of advice for companies who want to avoid being disruptive, what would you say?
Focus on what really matters, and try to get the collaboration in your company right, and utilize, let's say, other companies in the area. I mean, you can have a good company, but what you really see is companies are competitive if they are in the cluster with other companies, and yes, because you don't need to do everything, you just need to, and this is what I would really focus on in Europe. I mean, there are so many companies who was very good at something, to really say, hey, let's work together. Let's really focus on what matters and focus on the value. And then you can be quite competitive, right? But you should not think that, I mean, cut down on this unnecessary, I don't know, call it discussion or whatever. Really focus on what matters, and then you can be competitive. If you're, I mean, you have the equipment, you have the expertise, so you can utilize this. But don't get complacent and see where you can get better.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you today, Olaf. Really interesting conversation. Looking forward to continuing the conversation at CDMO Live in May.
Looking forward to that. Thanks.
Experience the future of contract manufacturing at CDMO Live 2025. Join us at the World Trade Centre Rotterdam on May the 7th and 8th, 2025 for an exclusive event that brings together the sharpest minds in biopharma outsourcing. For 2 days filled with market insights, best practices and partnering. Early bird tickets are now available, so head to cdmolive.com to download the agenda and to book your ticket.